Every story leaves something behind. A whisper. A shadow. A question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully. Because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. The first story tonight was sent in by someone who got caught in a blizzard in the backcountry of Montana. He found shelter in a cabin that shouldn't have existed, and he wasn't alone inside it. The details he shared are hard to explain away. The footprints in the snow were going the wrong direction. They led away from the cabin I'd just found, but I hadn't seen a single person for hours, and the snow had only started falling 20 minutes ago. This was January of 2019. I was snowshoeing a backcountry trail in northern Montana, about 9 miles from the nearest plowed road. I'd planned a day trip, but the weather turned faster than anything I'd seen. The sky went from overcast to white in maybe 15 minutes. The wind came in hard, maybe 40 miles an hour, and the temperature dropped so fast my water bottle started icing over through my pack. I knew I was in trouble. I followed my GPS back toward the trailhead, but visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. I could barely see my own snowshoes. That's when I spotted the cabin. It was small, maybe 12 by 12, with a pitched tin roof and a single window facing the trail. It wasn't on my map. It wasn't on any map I'd downloaded. But it had 4 walls and what looked like a door, and that was enough. I pushed the door open. Inside was a single room with a wood-burning stove, a cot with a bare mattress, and a small wooden table. There were no decorations, no personal items. It looked like a Forest Service emergency shelter, except I'd checked every listed shelter in this area before my trip, and this one didn't exist. I got a fire going in the stove using some old newspaper and dry wood stacked against the back wall. The cabin warmed up slowly. The wind screamed outside like something alive. I sat on the cot and ate a granola bar and tried to wait it out. That's when I noticed the footprints. I looked out through the window and could barely make out a line of tracks in the snow leading away from the front door into the white. They were fresh. Deep boot prints, maybe a size 12 or 13. Way bigger than mine. They hadn't been there when I arrived 5 minutes earlier. I was sure of that because I'd walked that exact path to the door. I told myself someone else had been nearby. Maybe they'd approached the cabin, seen me go in, and walked away. That was the rational explanation. But the tracks started right at the door. Not approaching and then turning away. Starting at the door and walking out. Like someone had been inside and left the moment I entered. I checked the cabin again. 1 room. No closet. No crawl space. Nowhere to hide. The stove had been cold when I arrived. The cot was bare. There was no indication anyone had been here. I sat back on the cot and stared at the stove. The fire crackled. The blizzard howled. I tried not to think about it. About an hour later, I looked out the window again. The footprints were gone, buried under fresh snow. But there was a new set. Coming toward the cabin this time. They stopped about 15 feet from the door. I watched the window for a long time. I never saw anyone. I never heard anything over the wind. But every 20 or 30 minutes, when I'd check, the tracks were closer. 10 feet. Then 5. The blizzard broke around 4 in the afternoon. I left the cabin fast, didn't look back, and made it to my truck before dark. I reported the cabin to the ranger station the next day. They told me there was no structure at those coordinates. I showed them photos I'd taken. The ranger looked at them for a while and said he'd send someone out. A week later I called back. They said they found the location. There was a flat clearing, an old stone foundation mostly buried in snow, and nothing else. No cabin. No stove. No cot. Just a foundation from something that had burned down in the 1970s. I still have the photos on my phone. The cabin is clearly there. I can see the smoke coming from the stovepipe. I don't know what I stayed in that day, but something was there with me. And I think it wanted me to stay longer. That one is unsettling in a way that's hard to pin down, but the next story takes place on an empty highway in South Dakota, and it's a lot more direct. This story was sent in by a man who got stranded on Interstate 90 during a blizzard. He wasn't alone on that road, but whoever was out there with him wasn't looking for help. The man standing outside my car window wasn't there 3 seconds ago. I'd been staring at that exact spot in the snow, watching the guardrail disappear under drifts, and then he was just there. Standing still. Facing my car. This happened in December of 2021. I was driving westbound on I-90 through South Dakota, somewhere between Chamberlain and Presho. If you've driven that stretch, you know how empty it is. Flat grassland in every direction. No trees. No buildings. Just highway and sky. The blizzard hit around 8 p.m. I'd been watching the weather and thought I could beat it. I couldn't. Within 30 minutes, I was driving blind. The snow was moving horizontally across the road, and my headlights just reflected it all back at me like a wall of static. I slowed to about 15 miles an hour, then 10, then I stopped. I couldn't see the road anymore. I couldn't see anything. I pulled over as far as I dared, put my hazards on, and decided to wait. I had 3/4 of a tank of gas. I'd keep the engine running for heat, crack the window every now and then, and ride it out. My phone had no signal. That's when I saw him. The man. He was standing maybe 6 feet from my passenger window. He was wearing dark clothes, no hat, no gloves. His arms were at his sides. The snow was plastering against him, but he didn't move. He didn't flinch. I cracked my window and yelled out, asking if he was okay. If he needed help. He didn't respond. He didn't move. I honked my horn. Nothing. I thought maybe he was in shock. Hypothermia can make people act strangely. I almost opened my door, but something stopped me. His posture was too still. Not the stillness of someone freezing. The stillness of someone waiting. I locked my doors and kept watching. Through the blowing snow, I could just barely make out his shape. He stood there for maybe 10 minutes. Then he was gone. Not walked away. Just gone. 1 second a dark shape, the next second nothing but white. I told myself the snow obscured him walking away. I told myself that for about 20 minutes. Then I saw him again. This time he was on my side. The driver's side. Closer. Maybe 3 feet from my window. I could see more detail now. His clothes were old. Like a heavy wool coat, the kind you'd see in a vintage store. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were open, but they didn't seem to be looking at me. They were looking through me. I didn't yell this time. I just stared. We stayed like that for what felt like 5 minutes. Then he tilted his head. Just slightly. Like a dog hearing a sound. And he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide and it happened too slowly, like the muscles in his face were remembering how to do it. His teeth were dark. I put my car in drive and pulled forward, blind, not caring if I went into a ditch. I drove maybe a 1/4 mile, crawling, unable to see anything. I stopped again because I had no choice. He was already outside my window. Same position. Same distance. 3 feet. As if I hadn't moved at all. I don't remember the rest of the night clearly. I know I didn't sleep. I know I kept the car running. I know that every time I looked at the windows, I could see the faintest shape just beyond the glass, standing still. Sometimes on the left. Sometimes on the right. Once, directly in front, visible through the windshield only as a dark smear in the snow. Around 5 a.m., a snowplow came through. I followed its lights to the next exit. I pulled into a gas station and sat in the parking lot until the sun came up. I looked up whether there'd been any deaths on that stretch of 90. There have been dozens over the years. Exposure, mostly. People who left their cars during blizzards and were found later, frozen, sometimes hundreds of yards from the road. I don't think that man needed my help. I think he wanted me to open the door. I had to take a moment after that one. The last story tonight is the one that disturbed me the most when I read it. It involves a father, his 4-year-old daughter, and something outside their home that knew her voice perfectly. My daughter said, "Daddy," from somewhere ahead of me in the snow, but my daughter was behind me. I was carrying her. This was February of 2020, in northern Minnesota. We lived on a rural property outside of Ely, about a half-mile from our nearest neighbor. My daughter Lily was 4 at the time. My wife was in Duluth for work. It was just the two of us. The blizzard came in on a Tuesday night. Wind chills hit -40. The power went out around 9 p.m. I had a generator, but it was in the detached garage about 60 yards from the house. I bundled Lily up in her snowsuit, put her in her bed with every blanket we owned, and told her I'd be right back. I made it to the garage, got the generator started, and was heading back when the wind shifted. The snow went from heavy to absolute zero visibility. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I knew the direction of the house, but after about 30 seconds of walking, I wasn't sure anymore. Everything was white noise and cold and nothing. That's when I heard Lily. She said, "Daddy," clear as a bell. Not screaming. Just calling. Like she was standing 10 feet in front of me in the snow. My first thought was that she'd come outside looking for me. Panic hit me like a brick wall. A 4-year-old in -40 in a whiteout wouldn't last 3 minutes. I started moving toward the voice. "Daddy." Again. Ahead and slightly to the left. I adjusted and pushed through the snow. "Daddy, come here." Same distance. Not getting closer. Not getting farther. Like it was moving with me. I stopped. Something cold ran through me that had nothing to do with the weather. The voice was Lily's. The cadence, the pitch, everything. But Lily had never said, "Come here," like that. She would say, "Come get me," or "Pick me up." I'd heard her speak every day for 4 years. That phrasing was wrong. I stood in the wind and listened. The voice came again. "Daddy, I'm cold. Come here." It was slightly further to the left now. I realized something that made my stomach drop. I'd been following this voice for at least 2 minutes. If I'd been walking toward the house, I would have hit it by now. I'd been walking the wrong direction. The voice was leading me away. I turned around. I pulled my phone out and opened a compass app, shielding it from the snow with my body. The house was northeast. I'd been walking southwest, toward the lake. If I'd kept going another 100 yards, I'd have walked onto the ice. The lake was open in patches this year. I'd seen the dark water from shore just 2 days ago. I forced myself northeast. The voice kept calling. It stayed behind me now. "Daddy. Daddy, where are you going? Daddy, please." It sounded hurt. It sounded like my daughter crying. Every instinct told me to turn around. My body wanted to respond to that voice in a way that bypassed my brain entirely. I didn't turn around. I walked until I hit the side of my house with my shoulder. I followed the wall to the door, went inside, and ran to Lily's room. She was in bed, under the blankets, exactly where I'd left her. Asleep. I locked every door. I sat in her room with her until morning. The generator cable hadn't been connected to the house, so we had no power. I didn't care. I wasn't going back outside. Around 3 a.m., the wind died down enough that I could hear individual sounds. Something was walking on our porch. Slow, deliberate steps. Back and forth. They were too heavy to be an animal. They had a rhythm to them, like pacing. They stopped at the front door for a long time. Then, through the door, in Lily's voice, "Daddy. Let me in. I'm cold." Lily was in my arms. Asleep. Warm. Breathing softly against my chest. The knocking started after the voice. It went on for almost an hour. Patient. Steady. Like it had all the time in the world. We moved to Duluth that spring. I never told my wife exactly why. I just said I didn't want to be that remote anymore. She didn't push it. I've spent a lot of time since then reading about things people hear in blizzards. Auditory hallucinations from cold exposure, wind patterns that mimic voices. I've read all of it. None of it explains how a hallucination knocked on my door. None of it explains the footprints I found on the porch the next morning, barefoot, in the snow, too small to be an adult's. The exact size of a 4-year-old's feet. But my daughter never went outside. And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time. Keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.